Welcome to True Voice Shorts, a production of True Voice Productions, where we empower your story with voice. Today's story comes from our Memories of Ink series, featuring real voices from history speaking across time. This episode, Before the Ashes, After the Fire, is a collection of selected diary entries from Samuel Pepys, a man who watched his city burn, his country change, and his own life unfold one page at a time. Samuel Pepys, 1633 to 1703, wasn't a writer by trade, but lucky for us, he kept one of the most remarkable diaries in history. Pepys lived through some of the most dramatic events of 17th century England: the Great Plague, the Great Fire of London, the return of the monarchy, and war with the Dutch. But what makes his diary so special isn't just the history, it's humanity. He wrote for no one but himself, and left behind something astonishing, a window into everyday life filled with personal reflections, political drama, music, love, jealousy, ambition, and the occasional too honest confession. His entries are sharp-eyed, detailed, and deeply personal. Sometimes wry, sometimes heartbreaking, always real. Pepys was a naval administrator, a member of Parliament, and eventually president of the Royal Society, but it's the diary, written over 9 years, that has kept his voice alive. When he stopped writing in 1669, he feared he was going blind, but he made sure his words would outlive him. Today, we return to those pages, not as a history lesson, but as a chance to listen in on a life unfolding in real time. Pepys didn't set out to be remembered, he just paid attention, and now, so do we. Forward. Pepys' writing began as a private act, part habit, part curiosity, part confession. He recorded the rhythms of his life with striking honesty and detail. National upheavals, personal triumphs, sleepless nights, whispered fears, and occasional joys. By the time Samuel Pepys first picked up his diary in January 1660, he was already a man altered by survival. Born in 1633 to a modest London tailor, he had risen through education and patronage rather than inheritance. He secured a Cambridge degree and a precarious foothold in public service. Yet it was illness, not ambition, that most deeply shaped his inner life before he ever set ink to page. In 1658, Pepys underwent a brutal and dangerous operation to remove a bladder stone, a condition that had caused him years of pain and threatened his life. Surgery at the time was performed without anesthesia or antibiotics, and speed was essential to limit shock. Infection, hemorrhage, and post-operative complications were common, and many patients died days or weeks later from sepsis or internal damage. Against the odds, Pepys lived. The operation marked him physically, emotionally, and spiritually. He commemorated this anniversary for the rest of his life, treating it as a second birth. That experience shaped his awareness of time, the fragility of the body, and the urgency to observe and record the world around him. When he began his diary, Pepys was a watchful, curious man, standing close enough to power to glimpse it forming. His writing was private, candid, and searching, an effort to account for himself while the future remained uncertain. This collection begins in the months just before and after January 1660, as England stood on the brink of restoration and upheaval. Pepys, then a clerk with modest ambitions, found himself at the edge of great change, nationally and personally. The entries chosen trace that unfolding, the weight of history, the fragility of daily life, and the quiet intimacy of watching a man make sense of events as they happen. Pepys writes, not as a detached historian, but as someone keenly aware that he is still here, still walking the streets of London, still capable of love and folly, still able to witness a world reshaping itself. That renewed sense of life, born of pain and recovery, underpins the urgency and honesty of his decision to write at all. This is Pepys as he was. Candid, flawed, observant, and utterly alive. This day I begin a new book, and with it a resolution, to set down what passes with me, both in public and at home as truly as I can. It seems good to mark how a man stands at the opening of a year, with his hopes before him and his faults not yet hidden. January 1st, 1660. Reflections on a New Year. I rose early this morning, with business on my mind and company at my table, never knowing how many days like this I would one day preserve in ink. This morning, Mr. Moore arrived early with papers for me to sign from the past month. To my great comfort, he tells me I'll clear £80 in fees, better than expected, and another £25 for him, wrangled from the pardons. Though no fee was due, he managed it nonetheless. My brother Thomas came next, then my father, Dr. Thomas Pepys, and my Uncle Fenner with his 2 boys. Anthony's only child died this morning, tragically, but he still came. He was kind enough to be cheerful, at least outwardly, a civility I didn't expect, and one I appreciated. We gathered in the parlor where I had laid out oysters by the barrel, neat's tongues, anchovies, and wine in every shade, white, red, and sack, and fine North Down ale for the table. We laughed, talked over one another, shared stories that have long lost their punch but never their place. There was comfort in repetition. As the morning wore on, the fire burned low in the hearth, and the scent of pickled fish and malted ale clung in the room like something familiar and good. I sat back for a moment and watched them all, these people I've known all my life, aging, bickering, and leaning into the new year with the same hungry eyes. At 11 they left. The house felt suddenly quiet. At noon, I took my wife by coach to my cousin Thomas Pepys, where we dined with my father, Dr. Thomas, cousin Stradwick, Mr. Scott, and their wives. I met Thomas's second wife for the first time, a polite and respectful woman, though quiet. The dinner, I confess, was meager for a man of his means, plain meat, nothing more, a meal to be endured, not remembered. Later that afternoon, the king dined just 2 doors from us, though we didn't see him. Afterward, I brought my wife to Whitehall and sent her to Mrs. Pierce's while I went to the Privy Seal. Mr. Moore collected his fee, and we stopped along the way to witness the Duke of York escort his lady to visit the Queen, her first time appearing in court since the scandal. It's said the Queen received her warmly. We returned to Mr. Pierce's for supper, where I found the fees, 1 bag of £100, spilling open across the floor. I scrambled to gather every coin and fear I lost a few. At supper, we had a carboned calf's head, cut crosswise and meant to be broiled, but it came out raw and stayed that way. A decent hen saved the meal, though. I find Mrs. Pierce's table wanting. She keeps a poorhouse, and I trust little cooked in her kitchen. It is the first day of the new year. Let it be a good one. Not every moment of Pepys's diary is shaped by war or politics. Sometimes it's music that moves him. On this day, we see another side of Samuel Pepys, not the clerk or the witness to history, but the man who lights up at the sound of a well-played lute, who finds joy in melody, and who isn't above bragging about his own singing voice. This entry reminds us, even in uncertain times, art still lifts the spirit. Here is February 3rd, 1660, a moment of music and delight. Though my duties fill most days, there are hours like this one when I feel wholly myself, lost in the sound of my own making. February 3rd, 1660, his love of music. Though my duties fill most days, there are hours like this one when I feel wholly myself, lost in the sound of my own making. This afternoon I walked to the theater and saw The Scornful Lady. A good play, lively and sharp, though I've seen better. Still, it pleased me well enough. But the best part of the day came later. At home, I sat with my viol and let the evening stretch out around me. The house was quiet, the light low. I tuned the strings by candlelight, each note a small satisfaction. The flame flickered each time I plucked a string, casting the instrument's shadow across the wall. The sound filled the room gently, thin at first, then warm and round. I played slowly at first, half-remembered phrases, scales that took shape beneath my fingers. Then fuller pieces, familiar tunes that stirred in me. I sang, too, soft and low, letting the music fill the room a way that words cannot. It is a strange thing to find more comfort in a tune than in a conversation. But there, in the warmth of that moment, I felt something loosen, a kind of peace. Not long ago, I could barely hold a tune. Now I play with pleasure, if not great skill. And it gives me such joy to see myself improve, to feel the sound build around me. Outside, the streets were hushed and dark, but within these four walls, the melody held me. It was as though I could forget the weight of the world for a time and be only a man with a bow and a song. I could live like this, I think. No letters, no court, no quarrels, just the strings, the quiet, and a few songs to carry the day. History remembers the public man, but the diary remembers the private one. Today, we'll peek behind Pepys's front door into a marriage that's as tender as it is testy. There's love there, yes, but also quarrels, apologies, routines, and quiet resentments. It's messy, familiar, and all too human. Through it all, Pepys narrates with a mix of affection and exasperation, and more than a little ego. This is March 23rd, 1660, where daily life and domestic drama take center stage. Some days bring more strain than sweetness, but even in the quarrels, I can feel the shape of home. This day shows me again how uneasy a thing marriage may be. I find that a man may govern his business well enough, and yet fail solely in the small kindnesses that keep a household in peace. March 23rd, 1660, his wife and marriage. I spent the morning on office work and returned home to dine with my wife. At first, things were pleasant, but after the plates were cleared, she turned cold, her voice edged with that familiar tone. She was angry again about my spending, about her feeling shut out from decisions. I tried to explain, to hold my ground, but she grew more upset, and I foolishly answered her sharply. She cried then, not loud or dramatic, just silent tears falling while she turned her face away. I hate when she cries. I rose from the table and left without a word. I walked the streets for an hour, maybe more, my thoughts tangled, defensive, then ashamed. What she said was true. I do shut her out sometimes. I take comfort in my work, my music, my rising fortune, and assume that is enough for her too. But a woman wants more than bread and quiet. She wants voice, presence, feeling. I forget that. When I returned, she was sewing by the hearth. She didn't look up at first. I stood there, not knowing what to say. Then I sat beside her and placed my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. The fire crackled softly beside me. The warmth touched only the edges of the silence between us. Her fingers were cold, mine a little clumsy, but she let them stay. We sat like that for a long time, listening to the fire, saying little. But peace returned, slowly. In that quiet, I felt the world narrow. No office, no quarrel, flicker of the hearth and her shoulder beside mine. It was not forgiveness exactly, but something close enough to carry us through. Marriage is not a single vow. It It is 1,000 small ones, made and remade in silence. By autumn, the monarchy has returned, and with it, retribution. Today, Samuel Pepys bears witness to something grim: the public execution of Thomas Harrison, one of the men who signed the death warrant of King Charles I. It's not the first, and it won't be the last. These are the wages of revolution, paid in blood. Now we transition to a stark reminder that history, once set in motion, always circles back. The crowd pressed close, but I kept my distance. What I saw today will not leave me soon. October 14th, 1660, Lord's Day. This morning I went out early to see Colonel Harrison drawn upon the sled to execution. He was one of those who signed the late King's death warrant. He looked very cheerful and spoke confidently at the scaffold, though what he said I could not hear. I stayed only a short while. It was said he was hanged, cut down alive, and quartered as law requires for traitors. A dreadful thing to imagine. Later, I walked through Westminster and to Whitehall, where I spent time at the office. The streets were thick with people, all speaking of the execution. Some approved, others silent. It is a strange time to see justice served and still feel uneasy. Amid all the dinners and duties, there are moments when Pepys lets the mask slip. Today, it's his eyesight. He's worried, quietly, deeply, that he's going blind, and in that fear, we hear something rare from the usually composed observer. The ache of uncertainty, the dread of losing the very thing that lets him write, read, and make sense of the world. This is a quiet entry, heavy with the weight of what might come. I never thought much of my eyes until now, when each page grows harder to see. November 30th, 1661. Pepys learns he is going blind. All day I have been troubled by my eyes. I can hardly read or write without pain, and it frightens me. I begin to fear that I am going blind. It's a deep discomfort, more than the physical pain. The thought of losing my sight touches everything: my work, my pleasures, even these diary pages. I spoke with my man, Tom, and he says I seem out of sorts lately. He is right. I feel the weight of it. After supper, I tried again to write, but stopped. My head aches and my heart is heavy. God grant this passes. Sometimes the world changes in a single night. It begins with the faint smell of smoke, and by dawn London is burning. In these pages, Samuel Pepys becomes not just a diarist, but a witness to one of the greatest disasters in the city's history. His tone stays matter-of-fact, but the urgency hums beneath every line. He writes what he sees: the panic, the flames, the silent march of fire consuming all in its path. This is September 2nd through September 5th, 1666. A city in crisis seen through one man's eyes. It began as a flicker in the distance. I did not know yet it would change everything. I waked in the night with news of a fire. I thought it a small matter, so I lay down again. God forgive me. September 2nd, 1666. I was awoken just past midnight by my maid, Jane, who said a fire had broken out near London Bridge. I thought little of it. Fires are common enough, and I went back to sleep. By dawn, the sky had turned a deep orange. I climbed to the roof and there saw it, flames leaping higher over the rooftops, thick smoke rising like a storm cloud. It was not a small fire, but a wall of flame stretching across the city. I dressed quickly and walked out. The streets were chaos, people running, weeping, dragging trunks and children and bedsteads behind them. I passed men shouting in the street for water, for buckets, for help. But there was no order, only panic. I went to the tower to speak to the officers, then on to Whitehall to report to the king. He received me with great seriousness. Orders were given, but the fire was already beyond control. September 3rd, 1666. I did not sleep. The fire grows worse. A strong east wind drives it fast through the narrow streets. The thatched roofs, the timbered houses, dry from the summer heat, go up like tinder. I saw entire families gathering in the squares, surrounded by what little they had managed to save. The bells of the churches rang until their towers fell. At St. Paul's, I watched books, centuries old, burn to ash, as men ran in and out with arms full of paper, too late to matter. I took a boat along the Thames, thick with smoke. The flames danced on the water like reflections from hell. I sent my wife ahead with valuables and moved some of my own books and coin to the home of Mr. Evelyn's friend at Bethnal Green. I buried a wheel of Parmesan and some bottles of wine in the garden, thinking to preserve them from looters. There is no shame in such small acts now, only the fear of losing everything. September 4th, 1666. Still the fire rages. I passed through Cheapside today. Nothing remains. Lombard Street, Grace Church, entire quarters have vanished into smoke. I saw men cursing God, women praying out loud, and children wandering alone. All London has turned to ash and wailing. The air is thick and bitter. I cannot wash the smell from my clothes nor my hands. The world feels scorched. I met with others from the Navy office. None of us could speak long. The weight of it hangs heavy. Everyone asks who is to blame, but no one dares answer aloud. September 5th, 1666. At last the wind has calmed. The fire begins to die. Here and there, buildings still smolder, but the great violence has passed. I walked among the ruins. London is unrecognizable. St. Paul's stands no more. The great dome has collapsed in on itself. Stone blackened, windows melted, the bones of a city laid bare. I stood still for a long time, saying nothing. A man near me wept openly. I did not stop him. I write this now in a borrowed room, hands still trembling. I am grateful to be alive, but I feel hollow. What we have lost cannot be measured in silver or brick. We will rebuild, they say. But what will rise will not be what was, and somewhere beneath this ash, the London I knew is gone. The fire had destroyed a city. This day would shake a nation. June 23rd, 1667, the day confidence gives way to crisis. The Dutch Navy sails up the River Medway and burns its way into naval history, an invasion not at sea, but into the soul of the country. For Samuel Pepys, serving in the Navy office, the failure is not just public, it's personal. We had faced flame before, but never shame like this. We had spoken boldly of our strength. This day undid much that we had trusted in. June 23rd, 1667, the Dutch attack on Medway. This morning the city stirred early with whispers and then with dread. Word reached the office just after dawn. The Dutch fleet had entered the River Medway. They've broken the defensive chain at Gillingham and were advancing fast towards Chatham. It is unthinkable. We had all spoken so boldly, secure in the might of our navy, proud of our coastline defenses. But now the enemy sails not off some distant shore, but into the very heart of England, into our river. I dressed in haste and hurried to the Navy office. The halls were already thick with tension, faces pale, brows furrowed. Men who only yesterday scoffed at the idea of a Dutch invasion now sat speechless at their desks. Sir William Penn was there, more collected than most, but even he could not mask the worry in his voice. Letters flew back and forth between the Admiralty and the yards, urgent and grim. Orders issued faster than hands could carry them, but we all knew the time for preparation had passed. Too little, too late. Reports came in quickly now. Ships aflame at Chatham, sailors scrambling to defend their posts, cannons lost to disarray. The fire ships have done their work. I made my way to the wharf for confirmation. The air was heavy and smelled of oil and smoke, even from here. I asked a midshipman what he knew. "They've taken the Royal Charles," he said, not looking me in the eye. "They've taken our pride." I felt the words like a blow to my chest. I turned back. I could not bear to watch further. At the office, I did what little I could, prepared letters, recorded losses, argued with those who still clung to the notion that we might rally. We cannot. Our Navy lies exposed. The Medway, our lifeline, our shield, has become a wound. The humiliation of it burns worse than the fire did in '66. That was nature, after all. This is failure. Our failure. As I write, I feel hollow and ashamed. I am part of this machine, this board, this great institution meant to guard the seas, and now I sit helpless while the enemy drops anchor on our doorstep. Outside, the bells toll. People gather in tight knots, speaking in hushed voices. Some are angry, others frightened. Some weep. There is talk of riots, of blame, of heads that will roll, and perhaps rightly so. The enemy came while we quarreled in meetings, while supplies were miscounted, while ships rotted in dock. I wonder, what have I missed? What more could I have done? I have always loved this country, but tonight I do not recognize her, and tomorrow I must rise again to face this wreckage. Closing reflection. We've walked with Pepys through the ordinary and the extraordinary, from candlelight rooms and musical diversions to fire that swallowed a city whole. What we've heard isn't just a record of events. It's a record of being alive, of navigating ambition and intimacy, fear and failure, beauty and destruction, often all in the same breath. His diary may be centuries old, but it pulses with something timeless. The need to make sense of our days while we're still in the middle of living them. In these pages, Pepys never tried to be profound. He just paid attention. He noticed what others passed by. He wrote it down. And in doing so, he gives us not perfection, but presence. That's why he still resonates. Because underneath the powdered wigs and court politics is a man who wanted to be remembered, feared being forgotten, and sometimes simply hoped tomorrow might be better. And really, don't we all? Some memories are never meant to be polished, only preserved. If Pepys moved you, made you pause, or reminded you of your own messy, beautiful life, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with a friend.